The Mexican Senate has refused to fight the cartels, with their most recent meeting about it spiraling into a brawl. The U.S. is now fed up and has finally intervened.
Mexico is saying that I offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to take care of the cartels. She wants to know, is that true? Do you think I'm going to answer that question?
That's why I'm asking. We'll see.
I will answer it. It's true.
But it's what they're planning to do to the cartels that will leave you in shock. Let's break it down. Trump declares war on the cartels. For decades, American presidents have wrestled with the growing power of Mexican drug cartels, treating them as a complex law enforcement challenge requiring diplomatic cooperation with Mexico. That approach ended abruptly when Donald Trump returned to the White House in January 2025. What had been a multi-agency law enforcement operation was about to become something unprecedented in U.S.-Mexico relations, a military campaign against foreign criminal organizations operating on American soil and beyond. The numbers that greeted Trump upon taking office painted a catastrophic picture of American vulnerability. Over 84,000 Americans had died from fentanyl overdoses in the year ending October 2024, a death toll that exceeded American combat casualties in the Vietnam War. These weren't abstract statistics to the new administration. They represented a national security crisis that demanded military solutions rather than diplomatic accommodation. Trump's response came swiftly and decisively. On January 20th, 2025, he signed what may be remembered as one of the most consequential executive orders in modern American history, designating 8 cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists. This wasn't merely symbolic paperwork, it was a fundamental redefinition of how America would confront the cartel threat.
The cartels are waging war in America, and it's now time for America to wage war on the cartels.
The scope of this designation was unprecedented in the history of U.S. counterterrorism policy. 6 Mexican cartels, the Sinaloa Cartel, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJANG, Northeast Cartel, New Michoacan Family, Gulf Cartel, and United Cartels, were formally classified alongside ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other international terrorist groups. This legal framework didn't just authorize enhanced law enforcement cooperation. It enabled military and intelligence targeting on a scale never before applied to criminal organizations. The implications of this designation cannot be overstated. Under U.S. counterterrorism law, foreign terrorist organizations can be targeted by the full spectrum of American military and intelligence capabilities. Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasized treating cartels as armed terrorist organizations, explicitly allowing Department of Defense involvement in what had previously been considered a law enforcement matter. The escalation was systematic and relentless. February 20th brought the formal State Department designation, cementing the legal framework for military action. February 27th saw the DEA securing 29 cartel defendants into U.S. custody as part of what officials described as collaborative efforts, though the nature of that collaboration would soon become a point of serious contention with Mexico. By March, the diplomatic niceties had been abandoned entirely. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth delivered an ultimatum to Mexico: address the cartels or face U.S. military intervention, including tariffs, naval embargoes, special forces operations, cyber warfare, and direct strikes. The language was uncompromising, the implications clear. America was prepared to treat Mexican territory as a battlefield if necessary. The military components of Trump's strategy were comprehensive and unprecedented. The administration prepared to deploy all necessary military assets, including the U.S. Navy, to impose a full naval embargo on the cartels, treating them as hostile foreign powers rather than criminal organizations. This represented a fundamental shift from interdiction operations to active warfare against cartel logistics networks. Even more significantly, Trump ordered the Department of Defense to prepare special forces, cyber warfare, and other overt and covert actions to inflict maximum damage on cartel leadership, infrastructure, and operations. This language, maximum damage through overt and covert actions, is typically reserved for military campaigns against enemy nations, not law enforcement operations against criminal groups. The intelligence dimension of the campaign was equally comprehensive. CIA-operated MQ-9 Reaper drones began conducting regular surveillance flights over Mexican territory, providing real-time targeting data for potential military strikes. This surveillance wasn't passive observation. It was actively gathering the intelligence necessary for what military planners call target development. Military analysts were already predicting the inevitable escalation of these operations. The deployment of sophisticated surveillance assets and preparation of direct action capabilities suggested operations that went far beyond traditional counter-narcotics efforts.
So I have a prediction, and this might not be the best prediction, but I think you will see the first U.S. airstrike on Mexican soil on the cartels. I think you'll see that this year. I have a prediction. And usually I don't leave my predictions, but I'm pretty right. I see it coming. And because of the lay of the land of the warfare, the type of soldiers that we're about to use, and I'm like, I mean, these are tier 1 guys. Like, this is all they do. They hunt, breed, kill people. Like,
The deployment of what analysts described as Tier 1 guys, Navy SEALs, Delta Force, and other special operations forces signaled preparation for surgical strikes against high-value cartel targets. These units don't deploy for observation missions. They deploy for direct action operations designed to eliminate enemy leadership and infrastructure with extreme prejudice. The economic leverage supporting this military approach was substantial and immediate. Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Mexican imports in February 2025, implemented in March after deeming Mexico's law enforcement actions inadequate. This wasn't trade policy. It was economic warfare designed to force Mexican compliance with American military operations. The success of this economic pressure was immediate and dramatic. Mexico's response included deploying 10,000 troops to the U.S. border and extraditing 26 high-ranking cartel members to the U.S. within days of the tariff implementation. The speed of Mexican capitulation demonstrated both the effectiveness of economic pressure and the underlying weakness of Mexico's position when confronted with determined American action. The financial warfare component was equally aggressive. By August 14th, the Justice Department had sanctioned 2 Mexican cartels and offered $26 million in bounties for their leaders, while the administration moved to sever cartel access to global financial systems, treating their economic networks as targets for the same sanctions regime used against rogue nations and terrorist organizations. The most dramatic escalation came with Trump's secret military directive on August 8th, directing the Pentagon to prepare comprehensive military options against cartels, including at-sea interdictions, airborne surveillance, and potential raids or airstrikes on foreign soil. This wasn't contingency planning. It was operational preparation for what could become the largest American military intervention in Mexico since 1916. The personal nature of Trump's commitment to this campaign was evident in his direct statements about cartel leaders, the promise that drug kingpins and vicious traffickers will never sleep soundly, again reflected the administration's view that this was not a law enforcement operation, but a personal war against specific individuals who had declared war on America.
Finally, as I have said before, I will ask Congress to pass legislation ensuring that drug smugglers and human traffickers receive the death penalty. The drug cartels and their allies in the Biden administration have the blood of countless millions on their hands. Millions and millions of families and people are being destroyed. When I'm back in the White House, the drug kingpins and vicious traffickers will never sleep soundly again.
Perhaps most tellingly, Trump's approach abandoned the traditional diplomatic framework that had governed U.S.-Mexico relations for decades. Previous administrations had worked within the constraints of Mexican sovereignty, seeking cooperation and accommodation even when dealing with the most serious cartel threats. Trump's approach explicitly rejected these constraints, treating Mexican territory as a battlefield where American interests would be pursued regardless of Mexican preferences. But as Trump's pressure mounted, it would trigger a political crisis in Mexico that exposed the deepest fractures in Mexican society, leading to unprecedented violence in the halls of power itself. The Senate brawl exposes Mexico's reluctance. The shockwaves from Trump's declaration of war on the cartels rippled through Mexican politics like an earthquake, fracturing relationships and exposing divisions that had simmered beneath the surface for years. Nowhere would these divisions become more visible or more violent than in the marble halls of Mexico's Senate, where the nation's deepest crisis would literally come to blows on August 27, 2025.
But in the Mexican Senate, a fistfight broke out between Mexican senators about U.S. military involvement to stop drug cartels on Mexican soil.
What should have been a routine legislative session transformed into one of the most dramatic scenes in Mexican political history. The day began normally enough, with senators conducting business and preparing to close with the traditional singing of Mexico's national anthem. But as the last notes of the anthem faded, the veneer of democratic civility shattered completely in a confrontation that would expose the rot at the heart of Mexican governance. The violence erupted when Alejandro "Alito" Moreno, the combative leader of the opposition, Opposition Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI, approached Senate President Gerardo Fernandez Noronha of the ruling Morena Party with clear hostile intent. This wasn't a polite request for speaking time or a procedural disagreement. This was a deliberate confrontation over the most consequential issue facing Mexico, whether to resist or accommodate American military intervention against cartels operating on Mexican soil. The brutal reality of what happened next would be captured on video and broadcast worldwide. Moreno didn't simply demand speaking time. He grabbed Fernandez Noronha physically, shouting demands before the confrontation escalated into violence, where Moreno slapped Fernandez Noronha on the neck and arms and knocked down an aide named Emiliano Gonzalez, who attempted to intervene. The scenes of lawmakers physically attacking each other sent shockwaves throughout Mexico and the international community. The violence escalated further as another PRI senator joined the melee, yanking Fernandez Noronha's jacket and swinging at him as he tried to escape the chaos. These weren't momentary lapses in judgment. They were sustained acts of political violence in the nation's highest legislative chamber, broadcast live to a horrified public. The underlying cause of this unprecedented violence wasn't a budget dispute or electoral disagreement. It was a heated debate on U.S. anti-cartel operations, with the ruling Morena Party accusing the opposition PRI and PAN of advocating for U.S. military involvement. The accusation struck at the very heart of Mexican national identity, that opposition politicians were essentially inviting foreign military forces onto Mexican soil. This accusation wasn't made in a vacuum. The opposition's alleged openness to American military assistance had been fueled by a PAN senator's appearance on Fox News calling for American assistance and recent U.S. designations of cartels as terrorists. More significantly, the debate intensified amid reports of Trump's secret directive authorizing U.S. military force against cartels.
And people were asking, like, well, which one is funded by the cartels? Because they were arguing about that, and all the replies are like, it's Mexico, both of them.
Right. It's like the Sinaloas on one side, New Generation on the other. It's like they all have their squads.
This cynical observation from social media users captured a disturbing reality about Mexican politics that the brawl had exposed. The speculation that different senators might be aligned with different cartels, Sinaloas on one side, New Generation on the other, reflected the widespread belief among Mexicans that their political class had been thoroughly compromised by cartel money and influence. The aftermath of the brawl was swift and severe. Fernandez Noronha later claimed in a press conference that Moreno had threatened his life, saying, "He hit me on the arms and said, 'I'm going to beat the shit out of you. I'm going to kill you.'" The allegations weren't just about physical violence. They were about death threats between sitting senators over foreign policy decisions. Moreno countered on social media that Fernandez Noronha had initiated the physical aggression and that the ruling party had altered the agenda to silence opposition voices, claiming he would always respond head-on with character and without fear to defend Mexico. The competing narratives revealed how deeply the cartel crisis had divided Mexican politics along lines that transcended traditional party affiliations. The political earthquake had immediate institutional consequences. Fernandez Noronha announced an emergency session for August 29th to propose expelling Moreno and 3 other PRI lawmakers while filing criminal complaints against them. The prospect of expelling opposition senators over their alleged support for American military intervention represented an unprecedented escalation in Mexican political warfare. But the Senate brawl was merely the most visible symptom of Mexico's deeper reluctance to effectively confront the cartel crisis. This reluctance has manifested consistently across multiple presidential administrations, creating the conditions that allowed cartels to establish territorial control over vast areas of the country. Under the previous administration of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Mexico had adopted what was widely known as the hugs, not bullets policy, a strategy that prioritized addressing socioeconomic drivers of crime rather than direct military confrontation with cartels. While this approach had noble intentions of reducing violence through social programs, its practical effect was to allow cartel territories to expand virtually unchecked across the country.
But that's because it is the lifeblood of the economy in Central America, in many parts of South America.
Talking about the drug trade, right?
The drug trade, right. If you cut it out, then you end up gutting the GDP of the country. You have these populations who would revolt if they were to go hungry and not be able to, because a lot of this is grown by local farmers and the like.
This analysis reveals one of the fundamental drivers of Mexican reluctance to combat cartels effectively: economic dependence. The drug trade has become so integral to many regional economies that aggressive anti-cartel operations could devastate communities that have become dependent on cartel money. This creates powerful incentives for accommodation rather than confrontation, as governments face the choice between law enforcement and economic stability. The scale of the challenge Mexico faces cannot be understated. Mexican cartels now control an estimated 30 to 35% of Mexican territory, a level of territorial control that rivals or exceeds that of many internationally recognized terrorist organizations. This isn't just influence or corruption. This is actual governmental control over vast swaths of the country, including taxation, law enforcement, and territorial administration. Mexico's response to Trump's escalating pressure has been characterized by symbolic gestures rather than systematic action. While President Claudia Sheinbaum has deployed 10,000 additional troops to the U.S.-Mexico border and extradited 29 high-ranking cartel members to the U.S., these actions appear designed more to appease American pressure than to fundamentally alter cartel power structures. The effectiveness of these measures remains questionable. While homicides decreased by 15% from October 2024 to February 2025, kidnappings increased by 13% in early 2025, indicating that cartels are adapting their tactic rather than reducing their operations. Trump's personal assessment of Mexican leadership reflects growing American frustration with what is perceived as Mexican unwillingness to confront the cartel threat effectively. His characterization of President Sheinbaum reveals the depth of American impatience with Mexican approaches to the crisis.
If Mexico wanted help with the cartels, we would be honored to go in and do it. I told her that. I would be honored to go in and do it. The cartels are trying to destroy our country. They're evil. She's so afraid of the cartel she can't walk, so, that's the reason. And I think she's a lovely woman. But the president of Mexico is a lovely woman. But she is so afraid of the cartels that she can't even think straight.
This harsh assessment that Mexico's president is so afraid of the cartels she can't walk and can't even think straight represents an unprecedented level of diplomatic confrontation between the two nations. Trump's willingness to make such statements publicly indicates his administration's view that Mexican reluctance stems not from principled opposition to foreign intervention, but from fear of cartel retaliation. The historical context of Mexican sensitivity to American military intervention cannot be ignored. Mexico has experienced direct American military intervention multiple times, most notably the 1846-48 Mexican-American War that resulted in Mexico losing nearly half its territory, and the 1916 punitive expedition that saw 14,000 American troops operating on Mexican soil. These historical precedents make any discussion of American military intervention extraordinarily sensitive in Mexican politics. However, critics argue that this historical sensitivity may be preventing Mexico from adequately addressing a contemporary threat that rivals any external invasion in its potential impact on Mexican sovereignty. The cartels don't just challenge Mexican authority, they actively replace it with their own governance structures, taxation systems, and territorial control. The evidence suggests that Mexican reluctance extends beyond policy disagreements to structural accommodation of cartel power. The Senate brawl revealed that accusations of cartel influence aren't limited to one party or faction. They permeate Mexican politics at the highest levels. When legislators come to physical blows over foreign policy toward cartels, it suggests that the stakes involve more than abstract questions of sovereignty. The pattern of Mexican responses to American pressure reveals a consistent preference for accommodation over confrontation. Even when faced with economic pressure like Trump's 25% tariffs, Mexico's response has focused on symbolic compliance rather than systematic dismantling of cartel operations. The deployment of troops to the border and high-profile extraditions appear designed to satisfy American demand while preserving the underlying structures that allow cartels to maintain territorial control. This approach may reflect rational calculations about the risks of escalation. Mexican officials understand that aggressive anti-cartel operations could trigger violence that makes current levels of conflict seem manageable by comparison. The fragmentation of the Sinaloa cartel following recent arrests has already led to internal warfare that resulted in over 800 deaths, demonstrating how enforcement actions can create rather than reduce instability. As this reluctance continues in the face of mounting American pressure, the stage is being set for a military confrontation that could reshape the nature of North American security permanently, with consequences that neither nation may be fully prepared to handle. cartels' secret warfare and America's covert operations. While politicians fought in Mexico's Senate and Trump declared public war on the cartels, a shadow conflict has been unfolding across North America that reveals the true sophistication and reach of these criminal organizations. This hidden war extends far beyond the border regions most Americans associate with cartel activity, penetrating deep into the American homeland through operations so extensive and well-organized that they challenge fundamental assumptions about national security and territorial sovereignty. The scope of cartel operations within the United States represents nothing less than a covert invasion that has been largely invisible to the American public. Mexican cartels have established comprehensive operations across major U.S. cities, including Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, Phoenix, and San Diego, which serve as distribution hubs, while the DEA estimates cartel operations in over 1,286 U.S. cities, reflecting their widespread influence throughout American territory. But perhaps most alarming is the expansion into areas previously considered safe from cartel influence. Recent reports indicate cartel operations have moved into Montana and spread across Indian reservations, exploiting jurisdictional complexities and limited law enforcement presence. These operations represent a strategic move by cartels to establish territorial control in areas where American law enforcement capabilities are most stretched. The sophistication of these domestic operations extends far beyond simple drug trafficking. Major money laundering networks now involve Chinese underground banking systems, processing over $50 million through trade-based laundering, cryptocurrency, and cashier's checks. These financial networks rival those of major multinational corporations in their complexity and global reach. The environmental warfare being conducted by cartels on American soil represents a form of domestic terrorism that has received insufficient attention. Illegal marijuana grows on public lands utilize EPA-banned nerve agents like carbofuran and metaphos, creating toxic contamination of waterways and wildlife habitats. The scale of this environmental destruction is staggering. 3 million poisoned marijuana plants and 465 miles of water diversion pipes were seized in California alone over 6 years. This environmental terrorism extends beyond immediate ecological damage. Game wardens and law enforcement officers tasked with confronting these operations have encountered military-level resistance that transforms American wilderness areas into combat zones. The transformation of these peaceful public lands into cartel battlefields represents a fundamental challenge to American sovereignty that goes far beyond traditional concepts of criminal activity.
And then we saw them. We saw two growers in green BDUs with SKSs or AK-47s, machetes. There were two of them, and they looked completely foreign to anything I would have ever seen in my woods up to that point. They looked more like a Sandinista crew running around in Nicaragua in the jungle. It was crazy. And what was really crazy was the amount of fieldcraft and stealth they were executing.
The military capabilities observed by American law enforcement represent a fundamental shift in the nature of cartel operations. These aren't street criminals with handguns. These are military-trained operatives conducting sophisticated field operations with advanced tactical awareness and professional military equipment. Their presence in American wilderness areas represents a level of territorial penetration that challenges basic assumptions about homeland security. The drone warfare capabilities that cartels have developed pose an unprecedented threat to American security forces. Mexican Army reports document over 260 bomb-dropping drone attacks in 2023 alone, with 42 soldiers, police, and suspects wounded and at least 5 killed. These attacks utilize modified commercial drones, particularly DJI models, equipped with homemade explosives, C4, charges, and sophisticated dropping mechanisms. Recent intelligence reports detail cartel authorization of drone attacks on U.S. Border Patrol agents, representing a direct military challenge to American forces. But the implications extend far beyond border regions. The technology and tactics being perfected against Mexican and American forces along the border can be deployed anywhere cartel operations exist, which means virtually anywhere in the United States. The evolution of cartel military capabilities has been accelerated by their systematic study of modern warfare techniques. Reports indicate cartel forces receiving military training in Ukraine, where they're learning advanced drone warfare tactics, urban combat techniques, and sophisticated communication security methods. These organizations are now incorporating lessons learned from one of the world's most advanced military conflicts for use against American law enforcement and military personnel.
If you guys have ever seen compilation videos of what Mexican cartels are armed with, they're sending Mexican cartels and you can pull this up, they're sending these cartel fighter trainer units, elite squads, to go to Ukraine to learn how to operate sophisticated drone technology.
The implications of cartel forces receiving advanced military training and active combat zones cannot be overstated. These organizations are now developing capabilities that rival those of many national militaries, with the added advantage of operating within American territory, where they can exploit legal and jurisdictional limitations that don't apply to foreign adversaries. The human trafficking operations that accompany cartel drug trafficking represent another dimension of the threat that extends far beyond border security. Recent operations in Northern California revealed human trafficking networks, forced labor operations, and evidence of sexual exploitation at cartel grow sites. These discoveries indicate that cartels have diversified into multiple criminal enterprises that collectively represent a comprehensive threat to American national security. The scale of cartel territorial control within the United States remains largely hidden from public view, but evidence suggests extensive and growing influence in areas where federal law enforcement presence is limited. Operations documented in Montana, South Dakota, and across Indian reservations indicate systematic exploitation of jurisdictional gaps and law enforcement vulnerabilities. This territorial penetration represents a fundamental challenge to American sovereignty that goes beyond traditional criminal activity. When foreign criminal organizations establish territorial control within American borders, complete with their own governance structures and military capabilities, they create conditions that require military rather than law enforcement responses. The American covert response to this threat has been equally sophisticated and largely hidden from public view. While public attention focuses on border deployments and diplomatic pressure, the real war is being fought through intelligence operations, financial warfare, and targeted eliminations that rarely make headlines. The financial warfare component of American operations has achieved significant success in disrupting cartel money laundering networks. Operation Fortune Runner exposed a Sinaloa cartel-linked network laundering over $50 million through Chinese underground banking in Los Angeles, while sanctions on individuals and entities involved in cartel activities aim to disrupt their financial networks. The intelligence dimension of American operations includes comprehensive surveillance and targeting operations that treat cartel leaders as high-value targets, comparable to terrorist leaders. CIA-operated MQ-9 Reaper drones conducting regular surveillance flights over Mexican territory represent just the visible portion of a much larger intelligence operation designed to map cartel leadership structures, financial networks, and operational capabilities. The success of these intelligence operations is evident in recent high-profile arrests. The capture of Ismael El Mayo Zambada on July 25, 2024, represents what many analysts believe was a sophisticated American covert operation that eliminated one of the most powerful cartel leaders in Mexican history.
And all witnesses were killed. Right? So I don't know too much about the details of exactly how they put him on that plane and everything like that, but it seems very reminiscent of, this pretty high-level covert operation by the United States.
Many believe that such high-profile arrests are not just about cartel violence, but are part of a covert war being fought in parallel to the one the public sees. Each hidden strike, whether financial, military, or intelligence-driven, underscores that the struggle with the cartels is not simply about drugs, but about sovereignty itself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.